完了这个中美之间的关系啊，再来说到今天稍后思想先驱报继续要为大家聊的一个话题。今天早上我和何明先生讨论节目的时候，还讨论到这个问题，就是极左之祸和极右之祸啊。现在呢，大家一提到极左啊，讲到网上这些小粉红啊，天天动不动就打台湾啊，今天往人家使馆扔鸡蛋啊，明天呢是集体抵制、烧车、砸车啊，到处做这样的一些事情。对，骚扰日本企业。今天早上我们这个华尔街网报也报道过了啊，给使馆打骚扰电话，往使馆墙上扔砖啊，给这个人家的汽车啊进行这个扔鸡蛋呐，这样的一些骚扰。然后呢，谁呀稍微的说了几句什么样话，在网上对人家进行群起攻之啊，像这个野狼扑上去一样啊，这样的一些极左的这样的一些键盘侠，同时极右完全呢基于对于西方的幻想式的一种完全不切实际的以白人基督教为中心的这种在西方都已经被抛弃的过时的价值观对于中国社会的一些现象进行这种我们说完全基于意识形态化的这一种抨击对于中国未来方向的发展完全基于自己想象的这样的一种理解。那么似乎呢，这已经成为了中国现在思想界的两种我们叫做脱离时代的这样的一种浪潮，仍然影响极大，让人觉得十分的暴汗。那么今天呢，我们要谈到的一个问题就是前一半有关于极左。这个有这样的一位非常著名的经济学者，叫做田国强。那如果您是经济学的从业人士可能会知道，田国强呢是师从著名的机制设计领域的开山鼻祖，诺贝尔经济奖的获得者Hurwitz，我们叫做赫尔沃兹教授也是明尼苏达州的这样一位知名的教授那么他后来呢做出了一个选择，就是呢被这个上海财经大学作为特聘教授到中国呢去进行一些经济政策的咨询同时呢也是上海市政府的这样的一位顾问那么田国强教授在美国的时候，实际上在业内就非常的有名有名有两点。第一点，他本身是50年代出生的一个人，是在中国对50年代湖北人在中国进行的完整的这个经济学的教育，但是在美国当了终身教授，非常的罕见
农工大学。
对，在德州农工大学非常好的一个经济院校那么呢，不仅仅是在美国获得了终身教授的教职，非常高产的一位经济学者。人家统计他在美国从事科研的时候，每年在顶级期刊发表论文可能10篇之多。这个大家不要小看，在经济学界发表10篇论文有很多重要的这样的一些论文。那么基本上这个我们说一篇论文从提交到产出这个周期是多少呢？有人计算大概是7到10年，1年之内就有10篇文章见报，这个效率是不得了的效率，而且基本全都是单一作者的，并不是说是20-30个人合作，像生物学、医学领域的这样一些论文学术领域非常有建树。那么在很多的排行榜以及影响力统计中，在华人的经济学家中，基本都是前5名到前10名这样的一个层次非常著名的一位教授。那么田国强教授有关于经济学、宏观经济学和微观经济学的笔记，我自己在读大学的时候也是他的读者所以呢，提到田国强教授这个名字可以说是振聋发聩。那么后来呢，田国强教授渐渐是脱离了学术研究的第一线，更多的呢是转向了政策的研究，同时呢教书育人为这个中国在引进海外的经济学人才方面也是做出了很多的努力。其实呢，田国强教授这一篇文章是在5月的时候就发表在一本学术期刊上了，但是发表在学术期刊上没有什么人看
学术研究吧。
叫学术研究，实际上是一本半学术性但是半评论性的这样的一本期刊。但是在后来的几个月里呢，渐渐被中国国内的一些微信公众号转载，也被一些新闻媒体转载，那么呢渐渐的进入了公众的视野。有关于这一篇文章在今天早上的华尔街网报节目中，我们为您进行了简要的介绍。在稍后的思想先驱报中我们会为大家进行全文的播放，并且呢其中的一些要点要请何明先生进行进一般的评价。整篇文章大概分析现在中国有3个经济方面的问题。哪3个问题呢？首先第一个问题是背景的问题，中美关系由战略合作转为战略竞争，不管是道路之争、意识形态之争，还是制度之争，还是全球阵营的划分，导致摩擦出现了某一种常态化的特点，这是中国所处的外部环境的变化。而第2方面就是田国强教授所说的过去监管的问题。监管是什么样的问题呢？田国强教授说，监管过度、叠加共振、 市场主体活力下降，预期不足，导致了企业信心出现了落差，对政府的信任也出现了降级。同时，疫情多点频发，疫情政策层层加码，给经济带来了很多的负面的冲击。这是第二点，过去几年的政策问题。第三点是我们今天要讨论的重点，就讲到的是中国现在社会思潮的变化，社会舆论导向出现的问题。这里他就说现在社会上出现了一股反对市场化改革的思潮，不是说过去市场化改革什么做的都是对的，但是你把现在中国社会出现的所有的问题都说是过去市场化改革造成的，否定市场化改革的必要性，甚至导致了这样的一种说法，说现在发展民营经济只是手段，不是目的，甚至把这样的一种反对民营经济上升到了路线高度，就导致整个社会极左的思潮变成了某一种政治正确，甚至是形成了某一种路线之争，这对于今天中国的发展是非常威胁的。在这一篇文章中田国强教授也一语道破，说提高民营企业的信心，你怎么喊话都没用，不能靠随意的、没有进行制度化层面落实的随意变化的短期宏观政策，这都是治标不治本。他讲，现在要挽回企业家和外资的信心，必须有关键性的举措，其中一点就是制度化。关键问题还是信心和信任出了问题，而信心比黄金还要重要。田国强教授在这篇文章中到底对于中国现在的现实情况进行了哪一些分析呢？他的这一番话是不是能够落入决策者的耳中呢？他对于现在中国形势的观察又有哪些疏忽呢？有关于田国强教授的这一篇文章，在稍后的思想先驱报我们会为大家进行详细的介绍。今天正午12点，在华尔街电视，大家不见不散。节目最后，感谢给我们打赏支持的观众朋友们，感谢艺人打赏，感谢云水打赏，感谢甜点打赏，感谢麦团打赏，感谢如是我们打赏，感谢 JZ 打赏，谢谢这些观众朋友们对于我们的支持。今天稍后为大家带来华尔街联报过去24小时的最新新闻评论以及各方的最新要闻。
随着中国迅速崛起，乌克兰战局持续升温，以及金砖国家联盟全球经济实力逐步增强，众多观点认为，我们正迈向全新的多极世界秩序，标志着美国主导和单极格局的时代逐渐逝去。那么，单极、多极和美国主导这些词汇究竟意味着什么呢？而如果我们正身处于新的多极世界秩序中，究竟会是混乱还是和平？我们的时代是否将迎来自由或压制？二战结束后，一个新的世界秩序诞生了。在1939年战火爆发之前，英法两大帝国掌控着广袤的世界领土，美国、苏联和德国迅速崛起，成为强大势力。5年多的战争过后，西欧遭受了毁灭性的打击。随后，英国和法国开始目睹其殖民帝国的解体，始于1947年印度和巴基斯坦的独立。接着是第一次印度支那战争，在1957年导致越南、老挝和柬埔寨从法国的控制下获得独立。1962年，阿尔及利亚从法国统治下获得独立。随后是肯尼亚于1963年从英国统治下走向独立。正在发生的是全球权力分布的巨大变革。许多学者现在将那个去殖民化时期描述为双极，在这个时期，权力突然从旧帝国转移到了新的角色手中，于是美国和苏联之间的冷战开始了。这场冷战在许多暴力冲突中得以体现。越南战争中，越南民主共和国和越南南方民族解放阵线开始接受俄罗斯和中国的支持，对抗越南南方政府，而后者越来越多地得到美国军队的防守。 在阿富汗，苏联军队与圣战者进行斗争，而圣战者则得到了大量的美国资金和支持。但是随着苏联在1991年的崩溃，似乎美国赢得了冷战。有人宣称，在这个新的单极世界中，美国已经成为了世界上的第一个国家，这被称为历史的终结。
Francis Fukuyama, author of the book The End of History and the Last Man. What's it all about?
Well, it's an imposing title.
在冷战时期的双极世界中，一个获得独立的国家是尚沃尔特共和国，它在1960年前是法国的殖民地。虽然尚沃尔特在技术上已经获得了正式的政治主权，但和许多其他前法国殖民地一样，仍然在经济上严重依赖于法国。尚沃尔特共和国没有对自己的货币有控制权，相反，它成为了前法国殖民地非洲金融共同体的一部分，使用与法国法郎挂钩的 CFA 法郎。发行这种货币的2家中央银行都受法国控制，非洲国家积累的所有外汇储备都存放在巴黎的法国财政部。CFA 法郎今天仍在使用中。尚沃尔特共和国在国内生产方面也高度依赖于法国，法国购买了其 27% 的出口产品，并向尚沃尔特销售了其 47% 的进口产品。尚沃尔特共和国的第一任总统莫里斯·亚梅奥戈于1960年上台，并很快禁止了所有政党。到了1966年，他在一次政变中被中校桑古莱·拉米扎纳废除，拉米扎纳成为尚沃尔特的第2任总统。拉米扎纳一直执政，直到在1980年被塞伊·泽尔伯上校发动另一次政变废除。2年后，他被少校长巴蒂斯特·维德劳戈发动政变推翻。维德劳戈不到1年就被上尉布莱斯·康帕奥雷废除，后者于1983年任命托马斯·桑卡拉上尉为总统。托马斯·桑卡拉是一个左翼领袖，他将国家更名为布基纳法索，意为政治之人之地，并发起了一场被他称为革命的大规模社会经济改革运动。他国有化了所有土地和矿产财富，发起全国扫盲运动，推行土地重新分配计划，启动铁路和道路建设计划，并禁止女性割礼、强迫婚姻和一夫多妻制等做法。作为他的革命计划的一部分，他为250万儿童接种了麻疹、黄热病和脑膜炎的疫苗，并发起了环保运动，计划种植1000万棵树，规范砍伐柴火，以防止撒哈拉地区的荒漠化。托马斯·桑卡拉和他内阁的12名成员于1987年10月15日被暗杀。暗杀事件发生在一次政变中，由他的前同事布莱斯·康帕奥雷领导。康帕奥雷成为总统，一直执政，直到2014年被迫下台。当时抗议者纵火焚烧了国会大厦。在所有这些进步中，布莱斯·康帕奥雷就在托马斯·桑卡拉的身边。在这里，他站在桑卡拉的背后，再次在这里紧挨着他。他们似乎是真正的朋友。在2022年，康帕奥雷受审并被判犯有谋杀桑卡拉的罪名。最近，该地区的不稳定局势有所加剧。自2011年以来，布基纳法索一直在其边境地区面临着一个由伊斯兰主义团体联盟组成的增长性叛乱，其中包括伊斯兰马格里布基地组织 AQIM、 努斯拉特伊斯兰 JNIM、 大撒哈拉伊斯兰国 ISIS of the Greater Sahara。 这场冲突现在被称为撒哈拉地区叛乱。2015年，这场冲突从马里蔓延至布基纳法索。另外，在2015年，罗克·马克·克里斯蒂安·卡博雷成为首位民主选举产生的总统，但他于2022年1月在一次政变中被保罗·亨利·桑多戈·达米巴中校废除。然而， 达米巴在同年9月被伊布拉辛·特拉乌雷上尉推翻，特拉乌雷现为布基纳法索的现任总统。特拉乌雷总统已任命阿波利奈尔·乔阿西姆·基耶莱姆·德坦贝拉为总理。桑卡拉对布基纳法索的愿景可能会在基耶莱姆的总理任内得以复兴。基耶莱姆自称为桑卡拉主义者和左翼人士，已经开始一系列改革，首先削减了总统、总理和其他政府官员的薪水。基耶莱姆曾表示，布基纳法索不能再脱离托马斯·桑卡拉划定的轨道之外得到发展。特拉乌雷总统和基耶莱姆总理在今年2月宣布结束了法国在布基纳法索的军事干预，选择与俄罗斯建立更紧密的联系。这与马里和尼日尔采取的类似行动相呼应。这两个国家最近都因撒哈拉地区的叛乱而发生政变。马里和尼日尔也向俄罗斯表达了战略合作的意愿。当西非国家经济共同体 ECOWAS 威胁要对尼日尔的军政府进行军事干预时，布基纳法索和马里宣布，对尼日尔的外国干预也将被视为对他们的一种战争行为。这一系列政变是否标志着西非地区新的政治阵营的形成？布基纳法索、马里和尼日尔与俄罗斯不断加强的关系是否意味着全球权力中心的转移？但更重要的是，布基纳法索的人民是否会看到战争的结束和托马斯·桑卡拉激进愿景的复兴？感谢收看《勇敢面对多极世界》。
Today's event focuses on the promise and opportunities for the new Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. IPEF, as it's called, harnesses the strength of long-term allies like Australia, Japan, and South Korea. It reinvigorates those relationships by bringing in increasingly important economic powers from the region, powers like the nations of Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia alone is now home to some 650 million people, and taken collectively, it is the world's 5th largest economy. It's no secret how America engages with this part of the world's most dynamic economic region, will shape so much of our future. And I think we all realize there's an awful lot at stake. Every day we see new threats to the rules-based economic order, an economic order that has lifted lives and built communities and advanced and improved the human condition. Our challenge is to find innovative ways to turn back those threats and to create new momentum for commerce, trade, and entrepreneurship. IPEF offers up a new rules-based roadmap that can help. It aims to provide a foundation for renewed economic vitality that helps member countries individually and collectively. All of this, of course, is music to the ears of WISC. And again, staying true to our mission, we want to make sure that we lift it up and prioritize it in today's foreign policy discussions. We are honored to be hosting the Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, who of course led the successful conclusion of IPEF's supply chain pillar. She's also leading the fair economy and clean economy pillars of IPEF negotiations that we all hope can be completed by the APEC summit in November. At a time when the U.S. Commerce Department is taking on massive new responsibilities in American economic leadership, including the effort to revitalize the U.S. semiconductor industry while also protecting our national security, we are all fortunate to have an exceptional leader at the department's helm. A good part of the criticism in this town is that we have too many public officials who don't understand the private sector and private sector leaders who don't understand the public sector and how government works. She combines the entrepreneurial spirit of a venture capitalist with her executive experience as Rhode Island's governor, and she applies them to the task of revitalizing America's economy and economic relationships. Joining Secretary Raimondo on stage is our own Dr. Sadiq Wahba. Not only is Sadiq the chair of WISC and the chairman and managing partner of I-Squared Capital, he is also a member of President Biden's National Infrastructure Advisory Council. He earned his doctorate degree in economics from Harvard University, and he began his career as an economist for the World Bank. I am grateful that he is here to help lead this conversation, And with that, I'll turn things over to you, Sadek, and again, Secretary, it's great to have you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Green, for your kind remarks. I'd like to also add my personal thanks to Secretary Raimondo for taking the time to be with us today at WISC at the Wilson Center. It really has been an extraordinary Department of Commerce, full of dynamism, and so thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
So when you look over the last 10 years, trade as a percentage of global economic growth, it was around 60% just before the financial crisis, and it's now down to somewhere around 55%, which is, from a relative perspective, it's a meaningful change. Free trade agreements are not in favor these days. We've seen an increase in trade barriers and tariffs, not just between us and China, between us and allies, and within EU, also an increase in trade barriers, UK, Europe, EU, and other countries. So we tried to have the TPP, and the Trump administration withdrew from that. And interestingly, immediately after, China started its own version of the TPP. But then in 2022, President Biden launched IPEF. And obviously, IPEF is not a trade agreement, but it looks as if it achieves much more. It really looks to the long-term economic prosperity of the peoples involved in IPEF. So what would you say are the long-term objectives of IPEF?
Yeah, a lot in that question. First of all, thank you for having me. It's fantastic to be here. And as I was listening to the ambassador's introduction of business people who don't know how to interface with government and vice versa, I would say that you, Sadek, stand out in that respect. We have had an outstanding partnership since I've been secretary, and I just want to thank you publicly for your engagement with me at the Commerce Department, but also with the president and everything we're doing in infrastructure. The public-private partnerships are more important than ever. In fact, this whole Center for Strategic Competition doesn't happen if it's just the government. So I want to thank you for recognizing that and working so closely with us. You know, you're right. Free trade agreements aren't in favor at the moment. Some people think that's a bad thing. Some people think that's a good thing. It is what it is. But yet, we must be present in the Indo-Pacific. As you said, 40% of the world's economy, most dynamic economies, fast-growing economies, chock full of innovation. We have to be present. And so for the 5 years before President Biden took office, the United States was not present economically in these regions. We didn't even, have a framework for engagement, I would say.
So you talk about supply chain, which is one of the key pillars. I think that you've reached preliminary agreement with all of the countries on the supply chain. You mentioned earlier that the IPEF framework in general has that flexibility for countries to select one or the other. Obviously, supply chain is one where I believe everyone wants to participate in.
Yes.
We had a panel earlier that talked about the key components of that supply chain. What can you tell us a little bit more about what it is that you're looking to achieve, and particularly maybe two areas? One is data sharing, which is an important element that people have talked about. And then the other one is more enforceability. So there is a clear benefit for all to participate in the supply chain structure, but do you think that the enforceability element is an important part of what an agreement should include?
Yeah. Okay, so a couple things. Yes, you're right. I was very pleased. I was in Detroit over the Memorial Day weekend. We had a ministerial. We had all of the countries were there, which is excellent. 13 countries came, and we agreed in principle, all 14 countries, to the text of the supply chain pillar. I just want to say, as evidence of the demand, the economic demand signal coming from this region, President Biden announced IPEF in May in Tokyo. 4 months later, in September, every country signed on to negotiate. And then a few months after that, in May, we had complete agreement on the supply chain pillar. That's, things don't happen that fast.
No, that's probably unique.
It is. The momentum, the speed, the pace, the urgency with which we're working this is incredible. You know, I have people on my team who worked on TPP. Nothing happened in TPP in a matter of months. So what's my point? My point is, one, they have a demand. Two, there's something to the fact that this is not a trade agreement. It's more flexible. It's responsive to a few specific needs: supply chain, decarbonization, infrastructure, digital. And so it allows us to move fast. Is it enforceable? I would say yes and no. It's not a traditional trade agreement. You know, it's not enforceable insofar as the tariffs don't come back up if there's non-compliance. But it is enforceable because countries that don't follow the rules or live up to their commitments don't receive the benefits, right? So if there's a country who is not following as according to the agreement, then they won't receive the benefits. That we have, for example, we've set up an IPEF supply chain council. Every country has an appointed person to that council. That's a way to facilitate commerce, a way to deal with issues, a way to share data, a way to predict supply chain problems before they happen, all incredibly valuable to all of our economies. You want to be part of that club. So this is more of an incentive. We want to provide incentive to participate. And in that respect, it's enforceable, because if you don't participate, you don't get the benefit. But it is true, there's no, legal enforceability per se.
So we talked about the supply chain pillar. There are, of course, two pillars where you're leading also, which is the clean economy and the fair economy pillars. The clean economy also includes a component which relates to global infrastructure, which plays a strategic element in the context of the U.S. overall policy of strategic competition. So what can you tell us about those two pillars, which really are going to complement the supply chain as well as the fair economy one?
So you know this as a businessman better than I, but every American company I talk to says we would do more business in, fill in the blank, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, if there were less corruption, a fair court system, tax structure which is fair and transparent and consistent. So that's what Pillar 4 is all about, which is to say, if you want the benefit of more supply chains in the region, more capital for infrastructure in the region, investors need to have some confidence and trust. So in the fourth pillar, which is anti-corruption, good governance, we're asking the countries to sign up to certain standards around transparency, predictability, anti-tax and anti-corruption. And if they don't, then they'll be kicked out of the club. They won't have the benefits. And we are also, the United States, I should say this, although the Commerce Department is taking the lead on this negotiation, this is obviously an all-of-government priority. So State Department, Treasury, USAID will be providing technical assistance to these countries as they improve their tax code, improve their anti-corruption, et cetera. With the third pillar, infrastructure and decarbonization, I have been to these countries. I have spoken to the leaders in all of these countries. They need better infrastructure. They want better infrastructure. They want to race towards a carbon-free world. And that requires capital, and that requires know-how. And so in this respect, what we are saying to the countries is, let us work with you and help you. Once again, State Department will be bringing money to the table to do like a deal accelerator, to get deals ready on the ground. Just as you know yourself, you can't invest in something if it's not investable, if it's not ready to be invested in. So the State Department, USTDA, USAID, gonna come to the table to get these deals ready. And then U.S. private sector and Japan and Australia and New Zealand excited to make these investments. I should say, I Squared Capital, in this respect, SIDAC is really a leader in this effort. He announced a $1 billion+ fund to invest in IPEF countries in sustainable infrastructure. And the DFC, U.S. Development Finance Corporation, put $300 million in that as kind of concessionary capital, if you will. What's the point? That's exactly the model. You asked, what does success look like? 50 more of those in the next 10 years. The DFC or the World Bank or Multilateral Development Bank or some kind of capital combined with pure private capital invested in the region to decarbonize, make our supply chains more resilient.
So you bring a very important element when it comes to fair economy, where you mention capacity building. Because one of the issues that you see in some, not just IPEF countries, but other countries, which is the willingness to improve rule of law, improve the systems they have, but it's a question of training, it's a question of capacity, it's a question of bringing in latest technologies, improving the education system. So one of the components of IPEF, which I think is, again, unique in its respect, is that you're integrating that capacity building effort directly into the different pillars. So you're looking to create that know-how, but with a direct impact associated with the fair economy pillar. So you're not basically telling countries, you need to do 1, 2, 3, but you're basically suggesting, we will try and help you in doing that. So could you give us a little bit of more information on how that capacity building will be integrated within the IPEF framework?
Yes, I mean, really it's exactly as you say. A number of these countries certainly have the desire and the will to take these steps. They understand that in order to attract outside capital, they will need to invest in, their systems. But so many of them say, like, how do we do it? It's very interesting. So that's when we can say, we'll send technical experts from the U.S. And by the way, it's not just the U.S. Japan is leaning in on this. South Korea is leaning in on this. Australia, New Zealand, they want to send technical experts as well to some of these other countries. And at the end of the day, what do we have? Like, if we're successful, we have a rules-based order with rules of the road, less corruption in this part of the world. So I think that it's not, the approach, as you're saying, it's not heavy-handed. It's not let us tell you how to do things. It's let us work together, offering technical assistance, capital, connections, connectivity, data, the end result of which is a more resilient supply chain for all of us and a real U.S. economic presence in the region.
So we have a summit in November in San Francisco. What would you like to achieve between now and November?
I'm smiling because I do have a lot to do between now and then. So there's the APEC leaders meeting in San Francisco at the end of November, and I am determined to finalize agreements with all of these countries on all 3 pillars that I'm managing. So the supply chain pillar, we signed up over Memorial Day. By November, I'd like to deliver the tax and anti-corruption and the infrastructure and decarbonization. And I also would like to be able to have a couple of more announcements, similar to the I-squared announcement, of real, concrete deliverables. That's what the region wants to see. Concrete deliverables. And quite frankly, it's what we in America need.
That's right. So as part of WISC and the Institute for Strategic Competition, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you a question about China.
Yeah.
So the president met President Xi Jinping in Bali. There was an agreement to improve relations. Since then, we've had the Secretary of State visit. We've had the Secretary of Treasury. You met your counterpart in Washington, D.C., and the honorary chairman of the Kissinger Institute on China, which is here at the Wilson Center, at the young age of 100, went to China and visited President Xi Jinping, which is amazing. The Department of Commerce is at the intersection of all of the different components related to the relationship with China. What is it that the Department of Commerce and you are looking to do with regards to our relationship with China?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I do plan to travel later this summer. We're still finalizing a date and plans. At a high level, we need to do business with China wherever we can. We need to promote wherever we can, but we need to protect where we must. And I have a role to play in both of those. So for example, trading wherever we can. There are many industries, food, entertainment. I was recently with Bob Iger of Disney. Their Shanghai park is growing gangbusters. You know, Starbucks is opening a store a day in China. I at the Commerce Department recently started an initiative around export promotion of small U.S. companies in the health and beauty product space. Like, there is no national security risk to the United States selling coffee and health and beauty aids to China. It creates jobs in America. There's a lot of benefit to doing business where we can. Having said that, we have to protect what we must and be eyes wide open about the threats and strategic competition. And in that respect, commerce is right at the center of that too. So deciding which technologies, whether it's artificial intelligence or semiconductors or software or hardware that the United States has that China wants to advance their military capability. Figuring out what that is and working with our allies to deny China that capability. And that's what we have to do, you know, protect and also promote. And then finally, invest in America. I'm of the view that by far the most important thing we can do as America in our strategic competition with China is to invest in America.
Exactly.
So if you look at like what I do in my little corner of the world, I am managing the CHIPS Act, investing $50 billion in America. I manage broadband, $50 billion to make sure every American is connected to high-speed internet. I do the export controls, denying China this technology, and export promotion, like I just explained. Of all those things, when I think about, hey, Gina, what's most important for competition with China, it's the first bucket, out innovating, investing in America. And so that's what I do every day.
And that's a little corner.
And that's a little corner. That's my little corner. But
one hell of a corner.
it's a important corner. But I think that first plank doesn't get enough attention. Yeah. You know, when people say, how are we going to compete with China? Bet on us.
Agreed. And I think, Secretary, the idea when you think about what the president has been doing over the last couple of years, which is invest domestically, a strong domestic economy with a strong labor force, strong economic productivity over the coming 10 years, is effectively going to allow the U.S. to compete internationally.
Without question. I believe it.